The inside story on the issues that affect you and your community. This is Local 12 Newsmakers.
Well, I think I'm going to reach out to all the members of council who are elected and start working on moving the city forward on the priorities that I think they really want, which are, police and fire and reducing the violence and investing in jobs and job creation and building a more inclusive city.
The sweeping vision of election night was long gone by the time that John Cranley was sworn in December 1st. And for the next month, the new mayor and council found itself locked in a fight over the streetcar that may have lasting implications far bigger than a construction project. Good morning and welcome to Local 12 Newsmakers. I'm Dan Hurley. When voters bring in a new president, governor, or mayor, a sense of optimism usually prevails, ushering in a honeymoon period. This era of good feelings may last a few weeks, a couple of months, until tough issues have to be faced, and that leads to reforming the partisan and ideological divisions. The strange thing about the beginning of the Cranley era at the Cincinnati City Hall, Cincinnati skipped the honeymoon period almost completely. Weeks before being sworn in, Mayor-elect John Cranley revealed himself as an activist ready to take decisive action, forcing others to respond quickly. With the tumultuous month of December behind him and a bit of a break for the holidays, I am joined this first Sunday of 2014 by Mayor John Cranley. John, welcome back to Newsmakers.
Great to be back.
And I haven't really had a chance to talk to you, certainly in an official sort of way, since being sworn in. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And the election that night.
Thank you.
Jeff was with you that night. I wasn't.
Yeah.
But so a lot of things have happened.
Yes.
And let's sort of take them in a little bit of sequential order.
Sure.
Even before you were sworn in, the Sunday before the election, when you and Roxanne Qualls were guests, I started a question by saying, well, I presume that the parking deal is basically a done deal, given the fact they're about to issue the bonds. And you stopped me and said, I don't presume it's a done deal. Well, it turned out not to be a done deal. How'd you get that undone? What happened? What was the dynamic there? Because you weren't even mayor yet.
Right. Well, remember that at a big picture, just to remind people that the plan was to mortgage our future and take the net present value of parking meter tickets and meter money over the next 30 years and spend it all on a bunch of pet projects today, which is not only fiscally irresponsible from a stewardship standpoint, that you don't steal the future value for today, because our kids deserve some of that money too, but it also would have had the impact of deterring business and hurting neighborhood business districts, et cetera. So it was a huge issue that was just bad public policy. And luckily, myself, as well as a super majority of council, 7 out of 9, agreed. And for whatever reason, even though for the last 6 months of the year there was a majority of council that was on record opposed to it, they weren't able to figure out how to stop it. And I sort of said, look, we have a clear mandate here, and we should stop this while we can before the bonds are issued. So we put together a letter. We worked privately with the port and said, hey guys, we want to work with you. We want to be partners for progress and for neighborhoods and for economic development, but not in this fashion. And I'm happy to report that Laura Bruner and the leadership of the port understood that there had been a sea change election, and they understood that it was not healthy for them or for the city to have a relationship like that start out this way. So I think it showed a bigness of character that they agreed to change direction, and I'm appreciative of that.
How much did it come down to saying, you guys don't pull back, city is a major contributor to the budget of the port, we'll make sure you get cut in the future?
I don't think it never got to a point of threats, but we made it clear that this was it was going to make a good working relationship impossible.
So now that got changed, 2 questions. What's the relationship going forward? Any problem with the board, with Laura Brunner as the CEO?
No, in fact, I had a 2-hour meeting yesterday with Otto Buddig, who's chairman of the board, and we're on great terms on a whole host of fronts. I've probably had a dozen meetings with Laura since I was elected, and they're doing great work with the land bank. They're at the beginning stages of some great opportunities to revitalize Bond Hill. Right. They're looking at the Go Cincinnati Queensgate development, all of which we support. And we are looking for alternative solutions for them to get a long-term revenue stream, but not one that would include the parking meters.
Final question in this area. Is the whole question of monetizing the parking meters dead, or is it something that may come back in another way that you would feel would be more fiscally responsible?
Well, the parking meters and ticket, good question. The big issues that we're facing right now, that there's a lot of positive things happening, but the two tough things we're going to have to deal with is a structurally imbalanced budget and the pension. I don't believe we should raise taxes, but even if somebody else did, we don't have any legal authority to do so. So the question is, how are we going to balance our budget? And the parking meters and tickets make up a decent chunk of money to help us deliver basic services. So the short answer is no, we're not going to monetize the parking meter money and ticket money, because that steals from the future, and it takes a one-time revenue source, it takes a recurring revenue source and converts it into debt service. We are going to be upgrading the meters and making sure that every meter, or virtually every, not every meter, but almost every meter in the city have the ability to take credit cards, be more convenient, more modern. And we might have to borrow a few $1 million to do that, but nothing like the $130 million that
Do you see a significant, I mean, one of the arguments was in that whole debate, some people said the city doesn't have to lease out the meters for 30 years to a private company. You could increase revenue by managing it yourself,
right,
holding on to it, but increasing rates and maybe doing enforcement a little bit differently. And that would give you more flexibility because you still had control. So the question is, in my mind, you just said you've got some budget issues. Is
right.
This a potential piece of the answer to that?
Well, I think it's part of a comprehensive solution. I think that it's true that that currently, because of the technology, people don't carry around the quarters and dimes that they used to, and we will collect more money if we convert to credit card collections, and we intend to do so.
Okay.
And that is money that will help our budget.
And that's mostly done in the downtown already. Most of those meters in the downtown are already converted.
Some, yeah. There's a lot more to do there, and certainly in the Hyde Park Square, Mount Lookout Squares, Clifton's, we need to upgrade those as well. Moving
on to another topic that came up again slightly before you were sworn in, took office, was the announcement of Willie Carden as city manager. How far back were you talking to Willie about being city manager?
I really wasn't. I didn't talk to him prior to the election. I've known Willie for a long time. I served with him as a city councilman. He was head of the parks, and he's got a superb reputation, and deservedly so, and he's done a great job with the parks. I mean, look at Washington Park, or Riverfront Park, look at Alt Park, look at Mount Echo. these are just gorgeous places, Mount Storm. And so he's a proven, administrator, and I thought he'd be a good pick, but it turned out it wasn't the right move for him and his family.
Is it that simple? Not the right move after a week in the job? Willie's been an employee of the city for a long time, 27 years or something.
Right.
Certainly knows what the city manager does. Just to have it happen 1 week in.
Yeah.
If I'm surprised, you must have been.
Well, clearly, it wasn't the outcome. It wasn't the outcome I was looking for.
That's right.
But
how's he come and tell you? Oh, I changed my mind.
The good news is that we're not losing Willie. He's still going to run the parks, and he's going to do a great job there. So, it's not like he said, I don't want to work for the city anymore. I don't want to keep, adding value to the city. He just decided that he felt that his talents were best used where he was, and for personal, family reasons, he decided to not go into that other arena.
I have to tell you, on a personal level, the one thing that bothered me was, this whole question of living in Coleraine Township and his family not wanting to move. I understand his family not wanting to move. That's one thing. But that's part of the charter. And sort of, it seemed to me, it was said, it's not really an issue. We can take care of that. And when something's part of the charter, I was a little surprised at the reaction about that particular element. This just may be me.
Well, clearly it's better for a city manager to live in a city. Although it's not in the charter, but it's clearly better for the city manager to live in a city.
It's not in the charter?
No.
Oh, I thought it was in the charter. Okay.
No.
All right.
Well, no, you can't change the charter without a charter amendment.
Well, I know that, and that's why I thought it was sort of dismissed as
no, I mean clearly, no, it wasn't unimportant, but but regardless, it's not in the charter.
Did you talk to Willie about that before you made the announcement?
Yeah, yes, Dan. I mean, he's not going to be the city manager. Let's,
yeah, no, I'm just trying to get. I mean, so where do we go forward from here in terms of? Are we now looking at a national search?
Yeah. I mean, I think Scott Stiles is doing a great job as interim city manager. I've worked with Scott for a very long time. He's very talented. He's a 27-year employee veteran. He knows the city inside and out. He's off to a great start. I'm hoping he'll be a candidate for the permanent position. But independent of that, we are going to have a national search and, and find the best person. And Scott may be that person, but we're certainly going to do a national search.
In your mind, what are some top-level qualities that you want in a city manager?
Well, I think most importantly is operations. The way the city charter is set up is that you really have a CEO, city manager who can operate the city, deliver basic services, clean the streets, pave the roads, put the cops and firefighters out there, and improve customer service and really give value for a tax dollar for the delivery of basic services. So that is, operations is without question the key and most important, and without that you don't have the right city manager. Secondarily is, I think, having the ability to lead on bigger issues. And one of the things I was excited about Willie was he had done such a good job at public-private partnerships and raising private dollars for the Riverfront Park. And so we want someone who has that sort of dynamism, whether it's a Willie Cardner or Steve Leeper, these kind of people who really know how to build public-private partnerships in a way that will build economic activity. Now, obviously, that in large part, that's my job too. But to have a partner would be great. But that's sort of the secondary. The primary is delivery of basic services, morale of the workforce, efficiency, customer service, productivity.
Do you have in your own mind, I mean, whoever you hire will come in, they're professional managers, they'll have ideas of their own, but do you have in your own mind, gee, I've always thought we could do X better, I think we could reorganize something better? Do you have some of those sorts of things that you just, as mayor, not just a city council member, that you would like to sort of are pet things that you really believe could be improved?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we're working with the business community, and we haven't started yet, but we're going to get a shared services commission going again that was shot down earlier, to look at how we consolidate services between the city and the county, because we're all part of the same county, and we should get away from turf wars and back to delivery of services. So we're going to be looking at shared services. I think we're going to combine it with not just shared services between the city and the county, but I think we're going to put that together with a new Phillips Commission. Dave Phillips, 20 years ago, headed a commission to look at operational efficiency within the city and made a lot of improvements. Like anything, 20 years go by, you got to do that kind of thing over again and look for renewed efficiency opportunities. So we're going to do both internal review, but at the same time looking with the county at how we can do shared services better. So I think that there'll be some real opportunities to help balance our budget by taking advantage of those efficiencies and removing duplication of services.
You know me well enough that that's a pet project, a pet ideal of mine. Right. Every mayor starts there.
Right.
I just hope you stick with it and really stay focused on that.
Yeah.
We're going to take a break right here and then come back and talk about some things. Stay tuned. After the break, Mayor Cranley will talk about agenda and priorities for 2014 in some other areas. Welcome back. I'm joined this morning by Cincinnati's mayor, the new mayor, John Cranley. John, welcome. We've been talking about a couple of things. Another area that obviously you spent a lot of time on in December was the streetcar. Right. Let me begin by asking this question. Did you make a tactical mistake? You were opposed to the streetcar. You made that clear during the entire election. Okay. Even when all of this was over, you still said you don't support it. Okay. Did you make a tactical mistake by not calling for a vote right away to kill it, as opposed to a vote to do a review and a pause and a review? Because you would have had the votes at that point.
No, I wouldn't have. I tried that. If I had had the votes to kill it, I would have in the first day. I didn't have the votes to kill it. I had the votes to do a pause and a review. And the pause that was put in place was a permanent pause. So I felt it was more likely to end in a cancellation, which was my goal, because I think the project is wasteful and not worth the investment. Yep. And if I'd had the votes to just end it on the first week, I would have, but I didn't. And I have to work with council. It's a executive, legislative, branch, and I was hopeful that the 5 people that voted to pause would ultimately vote to cancel, but they ended up changing their positions. So, I'm sure they voted their conscience. My conscience still tells me that we can't afford it, and it's not worth, especially when you think about there'll be calls to spend another $250 million on phase 2, which we don't have, and so I think we would have been better off making the hard decision to cut bait.
When Kevin Flynn, who was a guest on this show 2 weeks ago, right the day after the vote, he made the statement in council that now that the decision was to move forward, that was the beginning, not an end, that people had to really get behind it and make the deal work. Where does that leave you? I mean, you're very clear, again, where you stand on this. You're the mayor, you're the leader. Where does that leave you in relationship to the streetcar? I mean, are you going to continue to look for ways to end this, or do you just let it happen without any particular enthusiasm? What's your relationship?
Well, obviously, since the supermajority of council, went against my wishes, I have to respect the process, and so I'm not going to try to sabotage, the streetcar. Obviously, since we're going to be spending $150 million, and it's going to add $2 to $3 million of deficit spending to our city, I hope it works, and I'll do what I can to keep it on time and under budget. And so obviously, where we're at is I hope it works. What I care about is spending my time on 5 things: job creation, reducing the violence and the homicides, especially when you're seeing this huge spike in juvenile murder victims, building and expanding a Black and Latino and middle class with more inclusive practices, getting our budget under control, which I think the streetcar hurt our ability to do that, but we have to move on, tackling the pension, and making some progress in neighborhoods. So I wish the streetcar well. I'm going to do what I can to keep it on time and under budget, but I'm going to be spending my time on delivering jobs, reducing violence, building a broader middle class, tackling our pension and our budget, and trying to deliver for neighborhoods.
Before we move on to those 5 points, and there are some of those I really do want to talk about. On the streetcar, one of the things that happened in the midst of that whole discussion was one of the private dollars came in. The Hale Foundation, the business community stepped forward. But some of that was initially flowing through whatever, SORTA. Now, SORTA, the city appoints 7 members of the 13-member board. I have to presume you weren't happy about SORTA's view, given what you said.
Right.
Can we expect changes on that board?
Absolutely, we're going to expect changes on that board. The fact is that they were willing to cannibalize bus service, which people depend on to get, this isn't, the streetcar is basically a luxury item that people believe may or may not spur economic development. No one really believes it's a transportation system. Even the supporters say it's a luxury item that will make our city cool. Buses get people from their homes to their jobs. I've told this story many times before. I spent a great deal of time in African-American churches. Almost every week I see a woman in a nurse's outfit who has to leave early to catch her bus to get to her shift at the hospital. That's the face of public transportation. And those are the people that I care about. Getting people from their homes or their church or their family to their job and back home again. And that, to me, is what public transportation is supposed to be about. And so the proposal that SORTA made, since they have no money other than bus service, would be to continue to make her life, the woman I just described, more difficult with greater waits for bus service or higher fares to subsidize the streetcar. Because that's the only way they can make up the shortfall that the streetcar is going to create. And so I just felt that was a huge violation of what SORTA is supposed to be about and what Metro is supposed to be about and what public transportation is supposed to be about. So absolutely, I'm going to be appointing people who will prioritize the people who depend on the bus to get to their jobs and back to their families.
I looked up the term limits of all those people.
Yeah.
There isn't anybody immediately coming up. It'll be next year before there's... Do you have to wait to the end of those terms, or can you make changes before?
No, I believe I've got to wait till as each person, terms out.
Is your concern here about the board, or is your concern about the management?
At the moment, all of it.
Okay.
Right now, we have a... I mean, it's frightening to me that they were so cavalier in saying that we can absorb a $2.5 million subsidy, and the only way they could pay for it was by cutting bus service and raising fares on people who frankly need it.
Or bringing in private dollars.
How are they going to bring in private dollars?
Well, Hale and, I mean, all the business community did step forward, and that's been done in other cities, too.
Well, I mean, I mean, certainly I appreciate the $9 million that the Hale Foundation put on the table, but once the commitment, under the grant, the federal grants, once we build it, we have to operate it under federal grants. So what incentive does the business community have to give once they know that the taxpayers are on the hook? And so that's why my position was that all the private dollars for all the operations for 30 years had to be in place, because, frankly, I'm not optimistic that there's going to be an incentive for people to pay up when they know that the taxpayers are on the hook.
Okay. You ticked off those 5 things, and we've talked about a lot of talk about that middle class thing. What is it that you imagine that government can do in relationship to that?
Well, the city is... it's got a very large poverty rate as it relates to the region. In addition, the city has 50% white and black, essentially, and a growing and thriving Latino and Hispanic culture. And there are real disparities in outcomes in health and wealth among white, black, and Hispanic. And those are unacceptable. If we're going to be a progressive, future-oriented city, we need a middle class that everyone feels they can work their way into and be part of. And so we're going to be taking a comprehensive approach to this, where we're going to be expanding efforts to reach out with our own dollars. The city spends about $400 million a year with contracts, and yet only 2% of those contracts go to African-American-owned businesses in a city that's half white, half black. That's just totally unacceptable. We can build capacity and small businesses by making a more aggressive effort both with women, as African Americans, Latino businesses. In addition, we are going to be launching major efforts with job training and to work to reposition the unemployed. When I was in Washington recently, the Obama administration has made it a priority to help target efforts to the long-term unemployed. Companies are agreeing as a voluntary measure that they will stop looking at the length of unemployment on a resume. Huge disadvantage. If you and I have the same resume, but I've been unemployed for 12 months and you for 1 month, you're going to get an interview and I'm not, for no other reason than I've been unemployed longer. This is a horrible social outcome. And so Kroger's and I am going to get the city of Cincinnati. And we're recruiting some other local companies to go and voluntarily agree to change this practice in order to help combat this real crisis of long-term unemployment. And in job training,
this is an area I want to continue to talk about. We're out of time this morning, but I mean, all those are really interesting, and we'll come back to those other 4 points as well.
Right.
Thank you for being here this morning.
You're welcome.
Thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. Join me again next week for a conversation with some of the leaders who forged the movement to support the streetcar. What is in the future for that coalition? Have a good week.